Yet another state social equity program is being called out as nothing more than a distraction to the people and a cash grab for large chain dispensaries and MSOs. This episode, we're talking about Arizona. Back in 2020, Arizona voters created the social equity license program by approving the state's adult use cannabis law, defining the program as aiming to promote the ownership and operation of marijuana establishments and marijuana testing facilities by individuals from communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. It's a story we've heard and seen time and time again, and unfortunately, the result of said aspirations have gotten quite predictable. Per the article, Arizona advocates and social justice activists warned at the time the program would add to the tally of dispensaries, would only add to the tally of dispensaries owned by wealthy corporations. And that's just what happened. The social equity licenses come with more zoning headaches because they only allow for recreational sales. But they were still highly sought after as some of the last licenses available since the state has a cap on the recreational or medical licenses per 10 pharmacies. Arizona has 169 issued licenses with only a few still not in use. Some hopeful social equity applicants, often people of color, claim that they were victims of predatory financial schemes. Uh, Aggrieved parties have sought help from the courts or the state Department of Health Services, which oversees cannabis regulation in Arizona. But the state agency, which set the rules for this program, only can play a limited role in how it works, DHS Acting Director Jennifer Cunico said in a September 2023 newsletter. So, what's the point of even having an oversight agency in the first damn place when they don't have the power to report or act on what they've seen? More government spending, more taxes going to nothing. The agency's authority does not extend the resolving businesses or business disputes among or between licensees, she wrote in the letter to Tucson Representative Alma Hernandez, who had inquired about the problems within the program, nor are we responsible for investigating fraudulent or exploitative business practices. It says a lot about your governing body right there. All right. So programs had been predicted to fail. Arizona is hardly alone in failing to create a successful social equity cannabis program. Of the 15 state social equity programs, not one has resulted in an equitable cannabis industry across all four pillars of equity: industry, justice, community, and access, according to a 2022 report by the Minority Cannabis Business Association. MCBA says that the reasons for failures include lack of funding for startups, unwillingness to apply race-based criteria in programs, and caps on the number of licenses. Arizona Social Equity Program was a way for ballot measures authors to address the historic imbalance of marijuana arrests among racial minorities. Statistics, including those collected by state health agencies, show Black, Latino, and Indigenous people in Arizona are being arrested for marijuana related offenses at higher rates still per capita than white people. Numerous media reports also have highlighted complaints that dispensary owners are disproportionately white men. Members of this dispensary industry wrote Arizona's law, but left details of the social equity program to the state health agency. With suggestions from community members, the agency drew up rules that required license applicants or their family members to have an expungable marijuana offense in their past, have an income of below 400% of the federal poverty line, live in an area disproportionately affected by marijuana enforcement, take a marijuana business training class, and pay $4,000 to enter their application in a lottery. Qualifying applicant had to own at least 51% in any group or corporation that had applied, though the rules put no limit on selling a license once it was obtained. Remember that. We never had a chance, said Celeste Rodriguez, one of the principals at Acre 41. Of the 26 people who won the license lottery, she said most sold their licenses or control of future business operations for much less than their value. At least 4 received as little as $35,000 for their licenses. $35,000, y'all. Rodriguez is working with aggrieved current or former license holders, has reached out to lawmakers and plans to contact Governor Katie Hobbs to try to fix the nightmare of a program, hoping that she can revoke some of the licenses, and is lobbying for a new law that takes marijuana oversight away from the state health agency. Steve White, the retired co-founder of Harvest Cannabis Stores, we've talked about him many times on the store, sunk 1.8 million of his own money into marijuana legalization proposition campaign. He said that he discussed the issue at length with the measure's other authors, but found there was no model where social equity worked well. He acknowledged their plan included letting the DHS make the rules for the program, adding he had hoped that the agency would give applicants more time to find resources of capital for their businesses. The list of social equity license operators includes big names in the industry such as Story Cannabis, Nirvana, Jars, Copperstone Farms, Soul Flower, and Mint Dispensary, but not Harvest or True Leaf, which acquired Harvest in 2021. We chose not to put resources into that, White said. As the largest contributor to the initiative, he said that it would have been really hard to explain becoming a beneficiary of social equity program. Google that story. You'll find the real facts of what happened between Steve and Harvest, but we're not going to go into that right now. But White doesn't blame the other companies for taking over their partner licenses, saying that they just did what the rules allowed. As for original license holders, they did better than they could have done without the program, he said, even if the main vision of the program was never achieved. Mint Dispensary owner owned several dispensaries in Metro Phoenix before acquiring rights to 4 social equity licenses. My PR firm would probably not want me to tell you much, said Raul Molina, Mint's chief operating officer. Why would he even say that shit? The system is not how it should have been. For some original applicants, the program did not plan out as well for them as they could have because of who they dealt with, he said. I've heard some horror stories. Those who negotiated with Mint walked away content. He can't say much about the deals because of non-disclosure agreements, but they involved life-changing amounts of money, is what he said. In one case, a social equity license winner made a deal with Cookies, a multi-state cannabis operator. The winner didn't have the resources to open a business himself, and he and Cookies ultimately sold the license to Mint for $7.5 million, he said. For a guy who says that his PR firm or his PR rep are not telling him to say much, he is saying a lot here. Just got to say that. Another case involved license holder who formed a company called Woodstock One and entered a management agreement with Mint for the next several years. Mint will be paying them a large amount. Whether we do well or not, they are making a lot of money. They are happy to still have the license. Laura Avila, listed on the Corporation Commission records as one of 3 principals of Woodstock One, said that she's happy with Mint deal, but declined to answer any other questions. There's a lot to this story, and a few more well-documented and detailed retailer points of view in this article. So please check out this one. It's a doozy. Definitely worth the read at high9news.com. From a personal standpoint, I really don't know what else to say at this point. Back in 2016, 2017, I marched for the original idea behind social equity, helped organize and produce expungement clinics here in Los Angeles with Virgil Grant and several other groups. Went door knocking, educating citizens about cannabis opportunities up in Oakland, Supernova Women, Hood Incubator, and James Anthony. Shout out to my people up north. Corporate takeover was never part of this vision. It's the exact opposite of what social equity was initially meant to represent. 7 or 8 years later, what we're seeing from a state-to-state purview here is the same story being played out. And it's hard to believe that in the grand scheme of things, that social equity, at least in the ways that we've seen it structured and implemented, will ever provide the once promised sustainable viability for Black and brown operators. The clock's ticking towards federal legalization, rescheduling, and or interstate commerce, each of which are sure to provide even more challenges to what social equity means and how equity operators maneuver in an economic environment riddled with landmines. Even the richest of companies are struggling to navigate. So I don't know what else, or if there is another solution to suggest to this point, other than reparations, as retribution for the same communities wronged by the war on drugs. If I said I was surprised we are where we are now, I'd be lying, so I won't. But instead, I'd like to ask the rest of my team here, what do you guys think is the future of social equity? Is there a future at all, and what does that look like? I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High at 9 News, opening this one up.
I think the future of social equity looks like what you said. How much did they get? $36,000 for their license? Or
35 grand.
Yeah, 35
At least
grand.
4 of them received 35 grand buyout by these corporations.
That sounds like the future of social equity to me.
I mean, there's a thousand layers here.
Yeah.
My, I do have one question though. Uh, Probably the last quarter of what you were talking about, you referenced a social equity license that Cookies tried to sell.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was
For
just confused
7.5
about
million.
that. How did
Yep.
Cookies acquire that social equity license?
Like I
Does it
said,
say?
there's a lot of digging
I
to
mean,
do. I have no
there's a
idea.
social equity applicant that qualifies, and then he partnered up with
Mhm.
Cookies and whatnot.
Sure.
Okay, and then
And so they partnered up with Cookies to create some kind of
a
benefit for
social
that
equity
social
store,
equity
a social
applicant.
equity store,
And
right?
then that, for whatever reason, wasn't working. And so
Who
Cookies.
knows? Who knows? I'm. You can't. You can't say.
There's
You can't
not.
say it may not have worked. They could have had the offer to. Hey, I'll tell you what. If I get offered $7.5 million for my store, like I'm taking the $7.5 million.
Yeah, Mandy, there's nothing that indicates that they're not allowed to sell their license in this article, and so Cookies could acquire it. Different social equity programs have different dilution restrictions, exit
Yeah, in Arizona, they were allowed
protocols.
to. Yeah, once it was once the license was active, they're allowed to sell it
Mm-hmm.
immediately.
So I got a little riff, ramble, and rant for y'all
Oh
on
boy,
this
here
one.
we go.
Come on with it,
So
Yarrow. Come on,
yeah,
brother.
so look, I'm verified social equity in multiple markets: San Francisco, Sonoma County.
You look very social equity.
I've been working on social equity issues and policy going back to 16, 17. First was introduced to it with the Oakland program. And then when I saw the San Francisco program, I started laughing and crying at the same time because I grew up in the wrong neighborhoods. I went to the wrong schools and I got in the right trouble. And I've watched these iterations of policy, and it's been really challenging. I have a social equity distribution permit in San Francisco in my own name. I'm the only owner. I'm the only person on the cap table, and it's done nothing for me because the incubator company hasn't completed their raise and their build out. And so I've got nothing. I've got years of work and nothing because if they don't complete their build out, I don't get to be incubated. I go nowhere, and I can't move that license. And San Francisco is the birthplace of well-intended legislation that goes off the rails. And so one of the things that we had in San Francisco was this restriction to dilution and selling our licenses for 5 years, which is super ageist and super anti-capital and didn't make any sense. Like, why do I gotta own my business for 5 years? And so I think part of the problem is that in the social equity conversation around cannabis, we've tethered the expectation that intergenerational wealth can be created. And if I hear anybody else use that term again, I'm going to take a used gym stock and stick it in their
Pisses me off
mouth,
so
right?
much, Yarrow.
Intergenerational wealth.
And so hold on. I'm not done with this rant. And so the thing is that we were sold a better outcome than represents the average for what businesses achieve in this country. And then with that, people chased a bigger dream and everybody tried to hit a home run instead of just to get a second base hit and get on base. And so, it's challenging for me because I partnered with one of the biggest luminaries in social equity. They even won like a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Emerald Cup last year. And this person played me left and right. And what I realized is, well, I want to change the world and we need policies that help do that. People just need to tell the truth and be good and fair dealing in their business practices instead of just being shady, right? And so in respect to these programs, restrictions on dilution have made it harder for capital. Restrictions on sales have been a gold-plated chain around our necks. And so I like to say selling out is the new keeping it real. If you can get a net positive, get a net positive. Some people might get 350,000. Some people might get 3.5 million. Some people might get 35 grand. But what I got is 6 or 7 years of nothing. And so I just, on the one hand, I see what people are saying in terms of like, well, we're giving scraps to these constituents. And on the other hand, like a net positive is a net positive. The other thing I would say is that you quoted the policy organization that said that there's a failing in having these policies be written for Black and brown individuals and communities. And that is absolutely not accurate in my opinion, because the reason why we came up with these disproportionately impacted areas is because of what happened with the history of affirmative action policy in this country and the way a lot of those policies got shot down because they were race-based. And so we needed to come up with criteria that were based on the impacts, not the individual, not the immutable characteristics of those people, but the things that happened to them. And I've been saying for a long time, and this is not to take away from Black and brown communities, but indigenous communities often get overlooked, and there is a different look often for urban social equity versus agrarian social equity. And the helicopter flew over Covelo just like the helicopter flew over Compton. And so I think that it's my takeaway is always that a broken social equity program can often be better than no social equity program. But, and this is the final part of my riff, but these things have a greater chance of actually being effective if they're baked into the beginning of these policies instead of these retroactive bolt-ons that often don't do a lot. The challenge that I have right now is New York, where people were sold on a set of circumstances and guidelines. And it's like Charlie Brown, where that kid is holding the football and the other kid goes to kick it. And then they just push the football away and the kid just slips and falls. And so I still think that there's hope for social equity programs. I don't think it takes away from all the damage and FUBAR that is in these programs. But I don't think that social equity programs will ever be a substitute for policy around reparations, Rico. I think that that's a much broader conversation that deals with some systemic issues that these programs will never be able to address. And in the meantime, if they're putting resources behind it,
real quick,
I'd rather have it.
Real quick to that, because it was always promoted not just as generational wealth, but also as the closest thing. There's several people who said this. Closest thing to reparations is we're going to get in America today. This is a form of reparations. This is not reparations, ever. And that's my point. I'm never saying that this is reparations. I'm saying
you're never allowing
reparations
money. If you actually want some kind of sustainable wealth, you need to get in form of reparations, because this ain't it.
This ain't it.
People licenses.
All they're basically doing is setting people up for failure with all of this social equity, because you're giving
that's all
people
they did. It's a
enormous debt, enormous tax liability, enormous debt. Like it's not a winning combination for these people.
It's not a viable path to sustainable wealth at all. It's a fucking lie.
They should have just gave them all lottery tickets.
Might as well gave them some scratch off games. You would have had a lot less heartache.
Go ahead, Mandy.
In some cities, they essentially did. There was classes and required programs that they had to participate in, and some of them took up to a year with requirements of different like classes and things that had to be completed just for the opportunity to get in the drawing or to be considered for a license. So there was a lot of prerequisites just to become a qualified applicant, and you still walked away with nothing. Exactly. And at the end of the day, there's no guarantees in business, right? There is no guarantees. It doesn't matter what you've been through, how much money you have. I've seen people start businesses with nothing and become millionaires. I've seen billionaires become, completely broke. And so I mean, there is no guarantees. This is the game of life, right? We're all jumping in. We're all playing it to the best of our capabilities. So
that's right.
I think the one thing that's really,
what's that?
Which is, once again, we are building an industry that has never been done before. There is no rule book. There is no playbook. There is a semi-half-assed guess book that we're all just playing by. And it's all going to change. It's all going to continue to unfold. Nothing is set in stone. Do not put your stake in the ground and claim that this is how it will forever be, because that's the first step to losing. Just stay agile. Don't make really permanent decisions as much as you can, because you always have to be able to pivot as fast as you can. And I don't care if you're social equity or not, because it's just business rules.
I know we're way over time. We're going to pivot to Jason's story, but I would like to say just envision this. All four of us right now have been involved with social equity businesses in some form or fashion over the past 7 to 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
One of us is black, and the one of us that's black has never touched the plant.
I don't get the point.
That's social equity.
What do you attribute that to?
That's social equity in a nutshell.
Oh man!
I've been
What do you attribute
of course, you're trying to go there, Rico. Stop it! Stop the ridiculousness on that. We're gonna go to a commercial. We're gonna be right back.
Is that not social equity in a nutshell?
Yeah, you're cute. You're cute. You're cute. You're cute, Rico.
No.
Y'all put in more
Also-
work, and y'all struggling just the same as black people with the licenses. Is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
This shit ain't going nowhere, man.
It's not.